5,000-year-old tomb that was recently discovered in China. Particularly, who were the people who built it, and what does this new discovery mean for our understanding of ancient Chinese history?
What if one quiet patch of soil was actually hiding the oldest political story in China? A secret written long before the dynasties ever existed. For years, Wangzhuang looked like nothing more than a forgotten Neolithic settlement. But the deeper archaeologists went, the more the ground started behaving like it had something to confess. A history that wasn't supposed to survive this long, and a power structure nobody expected to find buried this early. You know, before they even knew the name Wangzhuang, this site just looked like any other old patch of dirt. But as the archaeologists started peeling back the layers, it became super clear that this wasn't an ordinary place at all. The sheer scale and organization of it hinted at something way more structured than just some simple farming village. Right away, it forced people to rethink what kind of community used to live here. And now, on top of everything they've already found, they just dug up Tomb M27. And honestly, this discovery takes the whole discussion about early Chinese society to another level. The tomb is absolutely huge for that era, about 4.8 by 3.6 meters. Today that's nothing, but back in the Neolithic world, that kind of space was a major declaration of rank. Big tombs meant serious power, serious influence, and serious resources. M27 is easily one of the biggest Dawenkou burials ever found.
Size of tombs and their correlation with grave goods. Many large tombs contained hundreds of grave goods, whereas small ones only possessed a few items.
But here's the thing. It's not just impressive. It's the piece that basically reveals the political structure that was running the entire settlement. Wangzhuang has already produced over 1,000 objects, with at least 45 tombs found. When you line up those graves, you can literally see the hierarchy laid out in the ground. You've got the small, simple graves. Then you have the slightly bigger ones with more items, and then there's M27 sitting right at the very top, clearly the burial of the person who was in charge of the whole operation. The fact that the person in M27 had a dual-layer coffin already separates him from everyone else. It says, this person mattered on a level way beyond just their family or clan. The part that really changes everything is that someone actually destroyed the tomb not long after the burial. They didn't wait generations. They went in almost immediately. The body was removed, weapons were broken, and jade pieces were scattered. That kind of behavior usually suggests some serious political rivalry was going on. It doesn't look like a simple grave robbery. It looks like someone wanted to erase him or send a very strong message. You don't vandalize a grave right away unless the person buried there had enough power to make some really powerful enemies. All of this fits with the new idea that Wangzhuang wasn't just a regular settlement. It might have been the center of a local kingdom they're calling Huaiyi. When you look at the large amount of specialized craft production, the organized layout, and all the mixing of cultures, it makes sense. This wasn't a random village. It was a hub where people from different regions came to interact, trade, or negotiate, and that kind of activity needs a clear leadership or structure. What really seals the deal is how incredibly diverse the items inside M27 are. You've got local Dawenkou stuff mixed with styles from the Central Plains, the Yangshao culture, and even influences from as far away as Kujialing and Liangzhu. That simply doesn't happen unless a settlement is acting as a major junction, a place where ideas and goods are constantly passing through. So, Wangzhuang wasn't isolated at all. It had connections, influence, and was likely a major destination for many different reasons. The crazy part is what this cultural mix tells us about the world Wangzhuang was actually part of. A site doesn't just start pulling ideas, objects, and styles from 5 different regions by accident, right? Something structured has to be happening. It means these people weren't living in some quiet, closed-off community. They were connected to a bigger system, one that needed contact, communication, and some arrangement that let certain people get things the average person probably never even saw. Archaeologists call it an interaction sphere, but honestly, it's just an early version of networking. Multiple communities were sharing techniques, trading materials, and using similar ritual symbols because they were connected. And Wangzhuang wasn't just copying, it was a key player. The stuff in M27 shows direct contact, not imitation. That basically turns Wangzhuang into a hub in a much wider setup, and hubs aren't chosen randomly. Other groups have to see you as important for that to happen. The Jade is the clearest proof. High-quality jade didn't come from this area. It had to be mined far away, moved over huge distances, and then carved by specialists who knew what they were doing. You don't get that kind of supply chain without powerful leadership keeping it all going. Whoever was buried in M27 had the kind of connections only elite leaders or emerging rulers could have maintained. If he had access to all that, he had real influence. And think about the labor for the tomb. They didn't have organized governments or taxes. If they built a huge wooden coffin, it's because the community agreed to spend time and resources on it. That means someone had the authority to gather people, plan the work, and structure the whole process. That's not something a temporary boss could pull off. It looks like early political organization. The layout of the burial grounds tells the same story. You can literally see the hierarchy in how the graves are placed. Small tombs cluster around medium ones, and the largest one is put in a spot so everyone would know what it meant. It's political messaging without writing. The setup tells you who mattered, who didn't, and who stood above everyone else. When you consider the timing, everything lines up even more. The Dawenkou period is exactly when different regions in China start pushing into each other, trading, mixing, and competing. Populations were growing, rituals were getting more complex, and different cultural groups were starting to overlap. It was the perfect environment for early leaders to rise and for disputes over status and territory to happen. Tomb M27 fits perfectly into that picture. It shows foreign influences, advanced craftwork, long-distance networks, and a burial attack that looks like a direct challenge to authority. Nothing about it reads like a quiet, peaceful community. It reads like a contested center of power where different groups were trying to establish who was in charge. Plus, the sheer size of the settlement reinforces that. It covered over 600,000 square meters, huge for that time. That means it had boundaries, zones, and some form of planning. Someone was organizing how that space was used.
The total settlement covers an area of at least 630,000 square meters. So far, the archaeological team has excavated a few hundred square meters of the tombs at the ruins.
The tomb itself even works like a record. When societies don't write things down, they show what they value through how they bury people. M27 reveals a group that already believed in hierarchy, ritual authority, and the idea that leaders deserved monumental spaces even after death. Those ideas didn't just appear with the later dynasties, they were being shaped right here. So Wangzhuang isn't just some random Neolithic site with a cool tomb. It's part of a bigger, older story about how people in this region started building political systems long before the Bronze Age. Even before they had writing or metal, they were already dealing with the same issues that later kingdoms faced: alliances, resources, identity, and power struggles. When you put all the pieces together, the size, the jade, the craftsmanship, the quick destruction, the cultural mixing, the organized layout, it all points to the same conclusion. This was a political center way earlier than anyone thought. The person in M27 wasn't just a rich man, he was most likely the leader, the one holding power as these early systems were forming. This one find basically forces everyone to admit that Neolithic China wasn't a slow, gentle build-up of small villages. It was already experimenting with leadership, hierarchy, alliances, and conflict much, much earlier. It looks like we're watching the early version of a state forming long before the dynasties ever showed up. In history books, M27 becomes the moment that proves China's political development didn't suddenly appear with the Xia dynasty. It started right here, at Wangzhuang. That's the actual impact of this discovery. It doesn't just change the timeline, it changes the starting point of the whole story. It's strange how the past keeps whispering new truths every time the earth is disturbed. Makes you wonder, what other stories are still waiting under our feet, just one layer of soil away from changing everything again?